Hello, I'm Allie Burns, and I'm delighted to be here today with Kelly Burton to talk about why philanthropy should support BIPOC-led entrepreneur support organizations. We're basically going to get right into it, but I wanted to first provide some introductions for context. So a little bit about myself. I lead Village Capital, and we are really focused on supporting seed stage entrepreneurs who are driving impact in problems that matter most to helping people live healthy and productive lives. But we're also supporting the ecosystems that surround these entrepreneurs. And we're really focused on reinventing the system to back the entrepreneurs of the future. So what the heck do we mean? What system is that? That's a system where innovation capital right now is flowing to just a few people, places, and problems. This is data that has been repeated over and over again, but until it changes, bears continued repeating. 75% of venture capital goes to just 3 US states. When it comes to people, 3% or less of funding is going to female-founded companies, less than 2% to Black and Latinx-founded companies. And then when it comes to problems, we did a survey that showed that just 15% of companies that are valued at $1 billion or more are solving problems in housing and healthcare, in financial health, and other sectors that matter to helping people live better lives. And so that's the system we're trying to reinvent. And I'm really excited today to talk about some of the work we're doing in that space in partnership with the Black Innovation Alliance. So I will turn it over to Kelly to introduce herself, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Thanks so much, Allie. And hello, everybody. I am so excited to have this conversation. This is something that we talk about all the time. And so when I saw the title of the panel conversation, I'm like, yes, let's do it. As you mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Black Innovation Alliance. We are a national coalition of innovator support organizations. Those are organizations that exist to support Black small and medium-sized businesses, tech founders, and creative technologists. And so at BIA, our mission is really to help build the sort of ecosystem that is necessary for Black innovators and entrepreneurs to thrive.
Love it. So I talked a little bit about some of the data that shows that Black-led companies get very, very little funding when it comes from venture capital. And we see the same problem playing out in philanthropy. There is one study that shows that while 80% of entrepreneur support organizations' budgets come from philanthropic sources, nonprofits led by founders of color raise roughly half as much as similar organizations led by white founders. So, Kelly, I'd love to hear your thoughts on why is this happening, and maybe what can be done to address some of these inequities.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think a lot of times our brains automatically go to, it's racism. And it's like, well, maybe, but let's unpack it a little bit. It's important to appreciate that in our country, white children are born into the world with 10 times the inherited wealth. 10 times the inherited wealth. And that shows up at every juncture in their lives, right? Where they are born, the hospital they're born in, the neighborhood their parents return to, the kind of schools they go to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it also shows up in their organizations that they end up leading, whether it's starting a nonprofit or whether it's starting a for-profit organization. When you don't have access to that early stage capital in the way of friends and family, donors or investors, it really inhibits your ability to test the model. We see that in the startup space, and we talk about it a good bit, but we don't talk about the ways that it shows up in the nonprofit space. A lot of white-led nonprofits, they tend to be able to access donors early in their church, in their neighborhood, in their family. And so if you've got an idea and you want to go to Uganda and build wells, then you could probably source $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 to do that. And so you get to build the model on the investment of people who trust you and know you. And by the time it's time for you to go to foundations, you've already proven out the model. Black and brown led organizations just don't have that sort of resource. So they're trying to access foundations from the very beginning. And the natural bias is against small organizations, against organizations with low budgets, and all of the implicit bias that causes them to not necessarily trust or want to invest in that Black leader who's trying to run that nonprofit organization. So I think it's really more systemic in terms of the lack of access to wealth and intergenerational wealth, as well as all the biases that exist when it comes to small organizations or low budget organizations. Yeah. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about Village Capital's journey in this whole conversation around allyship, because I'm hoping we'll get a little bit of time to talk about our awesome partnership. But I'd love to hear from you, Allie, about how you all at Village Capital came to this moment.
Yeah, it's and certainly it has been a journey. So it's a good characterization. Two of the core values that have been at the heart of our work at Village Capital in terms of who we support from an entrepreneur perspective have been, one, disrupting traditional power dynamics. So from the very beginning, the idea of Village Capital was built on the question of what would happen if you took power out of investment decision makers' hands and put power into the hands of entrepreneurs to make decisions on who receives an investment. And we have a peer selected investment process that has led to a far more diverse investment portfolio than sort of your average seed stage portfolio. So that is one value. Another is proximity to the problem. And I know this is a value that we share very deeply, which is if we are not investing in entrepreneurs who are proximate to the problem, which means entrepreneurs who are not 98% white male, Ivy League educated, well connected, we're not going to solve the big problems of our time, and we're not going to solve big issues. So those are two core values that have sort of sat at the center of our work at Village Capital. And particularly as the racial justice movement gained steam last summer, and we asked ourselves, what are the things that we can do to accelerate work to support organizations who are really doing the deep work in communities and who don't have the same access to networks or privilege as we, a white-led organization. And frankly, a shortcoming of ours and not being a very diverse leadership team. What can we do to accelerate this work? And what partnerships can we be building to leverage our network and our connections to better support these organizations and to be a better ally? So, as I said, it's definitely been a journey, and we've got a lot of work to continue to do. And we're really proud of the work that we're doing together. So maybe I can kind of get into that. But first, would love to hear, as we sort of launch into talking about the work that we're doing together, a little bit more about the impetus for starting BIA. How are you seeking to address sort of the broader challenges of low investment in Black-led organizations?
Yeah. So BIA was started out of a need, a couple of ecosystem builders getting together for coffee and just lamenting over all of the challenges of running these organizations and finding the necessary support. And we realized it was a systemic challenge. And so that's really the impetus behind BIA, wanting to create a bigger platform and a louder megaphone to increase the support of these organizations, because there's a lot of conversation around supporting Black entrepreneurs, but not enough conversation about how you support the organizations that exist to support Black entrepreneurs. They are the front line of support. There is no way you're going to be able to leapfrog over those organizations and get straight to the Black entrepreneur. It just doesn't work that way. And so in terms of how we are trying to address this, kind of going back to this need to kind of unpack what's really going on here, organizations tend to follow the path of least resistance. And so it's like, how can we remove the friction for organizations, corporations, foundations that want to invest in this space, want to add value to this space? How do we make it easier for them to do that? And so if BIA can function as a destination, a point of entry into the ecosystem and work with our members to field opportunities, it just creates a more efficient ecosystem, not just for our members, but also for our entrepreneurs. And so I'm really curious, what has been some of the big learnings from our work together and resource? I have my thoughts, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. It probably might be good to tell folks what resource even is.
Yeah, sure. That's a good point. And I have questions for you on that too. But resource for those who haven't read up on it, it is a nationwide partnership between ourselves and the Black Innovation, ourselves at Village Capital and the Black Innovation Alliance to support entrepreneur support organizations who are led by and focused on founders of color. And we're really excited to have the support of the Sorensen Impact Foundation, along with UBS, Moody's, Travelers, and others who are coming on board. So that is an initiative that we have launched to really address some of the unique needs of these organizations. And I'll very quickly launch into a couple of lessons because I know we just have a few minutes. I think one is that there is an opportunity to create a really strong network of these organizations to share. There's no formal network that currently exists amongst these organizations to share lessons learned, to share milestones, and to share visibility. And that's one of the things I'm really excited about that this project, I think, has been creating is the opportunity to build national visibility for these in many cases, highly local organizations. So I'm excited about that. And Kelly, curious to hear what your thoughts are as well. And, since we only have a few minutes, I'll just launch into my other question, which is, partnerships between organizations like ours can be tricky. And I would love to hear how that's going and maybe how we can be better as a partner too.
No, I appreciate that. And I think you're absolutely right. And we don't talk about it enough, how difficult it is to collaborate, especially for organizations to collaborate who are structured very differently. We were very intentional, even in those early conversations, to say, how can we model healthy kind of cross-racial collaboration among two intermediaries, one that's established and one that's just coming on? How can we make sure that we balance the power dynamics and ensure that the work is filtered through a racial equity lens and with the necessary cultural competency? And we committed early on to have the hard conversations whenever they came up. So a big part of it for me has been our ability to co-create a healthy culture in which we're able to collaborate. You just have an amazing staff of generous human beings. And so that makes it easy too, that are already woke. And so the onus is not on us to get them woke. They're already there. And we're all trying to figure out, how can we do this well, appreciating that we are learning along the way. But our hope is that we'll be able to model something that others can use, because oftentimes these relationships tend to be extractive for Black and Brown folks, and they walk away from these collaborations with a bad taste in their mouths. But we've had a phenomenal experience with this partnership. It's really enabled us to scale and build a mixed revenue model, and that's been really exciting for us.
That's awesome.
So I'm curious.
I would completely agree, first of all, with the spirit of collaboration, the willingness to have hard conversations and talking about the fact that partnerships are hard in general. These types of partnerships can be really challenging. And how can we model and how can we encourage the same types of collaborations amongst the organizations that we're supporting, as well as other organizations who are trying to solve maybe different parts of the bigger systemic challenges. There's often, I think, philanthropy can also play a larger role in encouraging these conversations instead of creating a system in which we feel like we're kind of competing for the same piece of the pie. Like, how do we make the pie bigger through collaboration?
And how do we incentivize collaboration? Yeah, I mean, I think it's up to foundations to, put out opportunities that really help to foster collaboration and collaborative models.
Yeah. Well, I think we have 1 minute left. So any final thoughts? 15 minutes goes by very fast on how foundations should think about supporting the organizations like those that are participating in the resource program.
Yeah, just appreciate that your low tolerance for risk as a foundation is going to disable you from investing in a lot of really cool, innovative stuff and a lot of amazing leaders. Foundations have to figure out how they move away from this bias towards large-scale legacy organizations. It's impeding so much progress.
Hear, hear. I have nothing to add. That's a great way to close it out. So Kelly, thanks so much for joining me, and really excited that we had this conversation today.
Awesome. All right. See you soon.